Welcome back to our podcast series on the history of rock music. In part 2 of our series, we'll be delving deeper into the emergence of rock and roll as a distinct musical genre. We'll discuss the impact of early rock and roll. It's like rock around the clock and roll hits like rock around the clock and Hound Dog, as well as the role of radio and television in spreading the music to a wider audience. We'll also explore the influence of other genres on rock and roll, such as jazz and swing. Let's start by talking about some of the early hits that helped to popularize rock and roll. One of the most famous early rock and roll hits was Bill Haley and the Comets' Rock Around the Clock. Released in 1954, the song became an instant sensation and helped to define the sound of rock and roll. It was used in the opening credits of the movie Blackboard Jungle, and its energetic beat and catchy lyrics helped to cement its place in music history. Another important early hit was Elvis Presley's Hound Dog. Originally recorded by Big Mama Thornton in 1953, Presley's version of the song became a massive hit in 1956. It was one of his signature songs and helped to propel him to superstardom. Its raw energy and powerful vocals helped to define the sound of early rock and roll. Of course, radio and television played a huge role in spreading the music of rock and roll to a wider audience. In the 1950s, radio was the dominant form of mass media, and many young people tuned in to listen to the latest hits. Radio DJs like Alan Freed and Dick Clark played a major role in popularizing rock and roll, and their shows helped to create a sense of community among young people. Television was also an important medium for rock and roll. Shows like American Bandstand and The Ed Sullivan Show brought the music into people's living rooms and helped to create a visual image of what rock and roll was all about. Young people could see their favorite musicians performing live on TV, and this helped to cement their love for the genre. Another important influence on rock and roll was jazz and swing music. Jazz had been around for decades and had already gone through several different phases of development. Swing music emerged in the 1930s and was characterized by its big band sound in the 1940s, and was characterized by its big band sound and lively rhythm. Many early rock and roll musicians, including Chuck Berry and Little Richard, were heavily influenced by swing and jazz music. They incorporated elements of these genres into their own music, creating a unique sound that blend different styles together. Finally, it's important to note that rock and roll wasn't just a musical phenomenon, but a cultural one as well. The emergence of rock and roll coincided with a period of social and cultural change in the United States. The post-World War era saw the rise of youth culture, and young people began to assert themselves in new ways. Rock and roll became a symbol of this new youth culture, and its rebellious spirit and energetic sound captured the imagination of young people everywhere. In conclusion, part 2 of our series has explored the emergence of rock and roll as a distinct musical genre. We've discussed the impact of early hits like Rock Around the Clock and Hound Dog, as well as the role of radio and television in spreading the music to a wider audience. We've also touched on the influence of other genres like jazz and swing, and the cultural context in which rock and roll emerged. In the next part of our series, we'll be exploring how rock music evolved throughout the 1950s and early 1960s.